Ahoy guys and girls, how's it going? Screezilla here, and I hope you're all well. And you join me for today for a bit of a chat on well, player figures, players, and communities. Now, you may know at the moment I've been a little bit annoyed and irked about War Thunder. It's been having a lot of trouble recently it's been having a lot of trouble, and a lot of that's down to the game itself, but much of that can be sort of accumulated to sort of the community at large. And don't take this as an insult if you're watching this, but much of the community don't really help themselves in the game like War Thunder, because what they do is, well, they get really sour with losses and things like that, and you know, they jay out of games, and it will cause problems, you know, and little things like that are what I'm talking about today. Things like the community just being a bit toxic and basically not helping the actual game itself. And you could say that jaying out is one of those things that's, you know, it's a scummy thing to do. But it's sort of a valid tactic, you might argue. Well, I would like to argue it's not. It's not a valid tactic at all. It's just being sort of a petulant child about losing. Today, for instance, you know, I've been trying to make a video on War Thunder all day today, and every time I've played, I've just had terrible matches. The last match itself was, in fact, one of those games where I ended up basically in a dogfight with a guy. He knew he was about to lose. I hadn't hit him yet, but I'd managed to outturn him. And, well, he just jayed out. Instead of, you know, dying, he just jayed out. Simple as that. And it was annoying. It was very frustrating, of course, because one, it left me without not having the kill, and two, it meant I was much lower than I would have been otherwise for my altitude. And this caused me a lot of problems because I ended up getting picked off by the Spitfire. And, you know, obviously I was easy pickings because I was much lower in my altitude and I was a pretty easy target. And, you know, no offense to the Spitfire, you know, it's not his fault, but the guy who ended up jaying out and sort of costing me that sort of area and sort of basically causing the problems, it's sort of his fault. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was the peak and troughs in player numbers. Now, what I mean by peaks and troughs are basically the amount of players at any one given time. And with War Thunder, you tend to be able to see these sort of these quite well, because basically you'll notice that whenever a new patch comes out, whenever a new shiny patch comes out with new shiny vehicles, you'll get a big spike in player numbers. And when I get a moment to do that, I'm just going to switch over to a couple of parts to show this. You couldn't have hit, could you? No, darn you. So, for instance, looking at the Steam records. So if we just open up this window here, and don't look at that because that's what I was watching. Yes, I was busy watching Mystery Science 3000 on YouTube because that's what I do when I'm in a bad mood. If we look at the player numbers of War Thunder, you can see that, you know, in certain times of the year, there's a big spike in player numbers, and that's generally when a new patch comes out. So when the newest patch comes out, we're going to see a huge spike in player numbers. And that's going to be great. You know, we're going to have more players on, we're going to have, you know, more people to play with, more battles and things like that. The problem with this is the players don't stay. The players do leave. And you can see this sort of within about a month or two. So from December to February, it went up 1,000 players and then went down 1,300 players. And that's more loss than it is gain. So there were more players that left the game than there were that actually stayed playing it. And this is problematic because, well, in a game like War Thunder, you really need player numbers to be able to survive. And if you don't have those player numbers, you're going to really suffer, because games are going to take longer to happen. Matches are simply just going to be a bit more boring because there's less people in the match, there's less people in the game itself. And that can really hurt how a game plays out. Now, I wanted to look at the average numbers for other games as well. So if we look at War Thunder, you can see that it goes up and down every time there's a new patch released. And we can tell straight away that it's going to go up again next time there's a patch released. But what's going to happen when... What's going to happen after that patch? Well, we're going to go down again. And usually it's going down a bigger number than it goes up. The initial updraft of players lessens, so there's more players that leave the game than actually stay in it. And that's usually what happens. Now, this is the Steam statistics, not the full statistics, but it's quite relevant because it does show most people are playing on Steam. You know, there are a lot of people that play via Steam with this, and you can sort of get a good idea. Generally, when I'm sort of playing, it's around about 20 to 30,000 players online. And back in the day, there was more towards the 40 to 60,000 players. You know, so you really do see a difference in player numbers. And that's a bad thing, because the less players we have, the less matches we're going to have. The less matches we have, the less players we have. The other issue, of course, is with a big update like what we're going to have, we're going to... We're going to find that a lot more people are probably going to leave because, well, they're going to get annoyed that all of the stuff is just sort of top tier, high BR gameplay. It's not, there's nothing sort of focused towards the lower end of the spectrum. There's no real new toys for people who have a low BR setup, who play in World War II vehicles. There's no real advantageous sort of reason for them to stay. And that's going to start causing problems because people are going to start leaving. Now, one thing I did want to look at as well was also the other games in the sort of ilk of War Thunder. So we have World of Warships. Now, World of Warships has not been on Steam for a long time. It's relatively new to Steam. So it's not got the same number of players on Steam as it does in reality. However, it's a good thing to look at. And you can see that World of Warships has actually grown slightly on Steam. The player base numbers have grown. The amount of players slowly are building. And you can sort of see that, and it's not really, there's not really these big drops in player numbers. There's sort of that you've had for other games. So for War Thunder, for example, there's a big drop in player numbers every patch. You know, every patch, you know, you have these bigger drops and these this sort of medium-sized drop and then a big drop. In these other games, you tend to have a relatively similar staying power, and that's very good for a game because it keeps the player base the same. Now, one other thing as well is with World of Warships, World Tanks and all of that lot, they have different servers for different nations. So Asia has got a different server to America, and Europe has got a different server to Asia. So, you know, so that it's hard to actually get a full a full idea of what's going on with what's happening there, because, well, there's so many different servers. There's a fair few different servers, a fair few different clients and things like that, so it can be a bit misleading. However, you do get an idea on Steam, and it does sort of show that things are relatively stable for that game. Now if we look at World of Tanks, now this is World of Tanks Blitz. Now Blitz is basically the arcade style version of World of Tanks. It's a very it's almost a mobile phone version of the game, so it's not the actual real World of Tanks. And with that, it's got player numbers upwards of 25,000, and the player base is relatively jumpy. You can see that the player base jumps around quite a lot. It's not very steady at all, but it's got the numbers there. And those are players that are generally just jumping on for a bit of a game now and again. They're not really that serious about the game. Now, of course, I don't have World of Tanks because we don't have World of Tanks in Steam, so I can't really show off that sort of detail to you. But you get a rough idea with this, and you get a very good idea of what games are doing well and what games are starting to struggle. And in all honesty, War Thunder is not... It's not struggling, but it's going to start to struggle because it's not bringing in new players. Every time there's a new patch, it's just old players returning and then leaving again because nothing's changed, everything is the same, and they're just finding the game to be very, well, very sort of dull still and not really worth their time. And that kind of thing is going to be problematic because it's just going to keep... The game's going to keep hemorrhaging players. The game's going to keep hemorrhaging player bases, and you're only going to have people left who don't really care about the game and just play it for, you know, shits and giggles. You get a lot of troll play and stuff like that. And yes, that's fine in its sort of minor numbers, but when it's constant, it can really cause a lot of problems. So, what am I trying to say here? Well, one thing I think Gaijin really need to start looking at how they do their patches, because obviously the way they release their patches means that, you know, the game itself goes well and they always have a big spike in player numbers. But that big spike in player numbers is not necessarily a good thing, because that big spike in player numbers is going to drop again the next month. It's only going to last a month. They're only going to get a quick bit of income or a quick build in players, and then they're going to lose everything again. And when you start having that happen, you start having a lot of problems, and that's when it becomes very problematic and the game starts to suffer. And the game is suffering at the moment. A lot of people I know are leaving War Thunder because of the problems that are happening. Things like the tail bug issue, and planes with their tails just exploding for no reason. Issues in ground forces. For instance, this week I've had at least 7 tanks being invisible to me on ground forces. 7 tanks invisible. It's not good enough. And this sort of thing is not good enough at all. This kind of game keeping and game sort of retention is not good enough at all. War Thunder rely heavily on their community creators to actually build up things and, you know, make things, give them their advertising. But when their community contributors are basically saying, look, you're doing everything wrong, you're messing up, you're breaking this, you're having problems here, you start to have problems because everybody else sees that. All these new videos that come out about War Thunder, problem here, problem there. Then there's the hype videos, because of course we're getting new shiny stuff. Oh my god, we're getting brand new things, we're getting tier 7 things, we're getting jets that can go Mark 1.5, you know. There's all the shiny stuff that comes into the game, but it doesn't help the game itself. It's not an improvement on the gameplay. It's just the same old, same old. And this is where wargaming does things right. And wargaming do things right. Wargaming do a lot of things right, in fact. Gaijin need to actually just give themselves a slap in the face and look at their competition, because Wargaming are doing a hell of a lot of things right. For instance, their premium stuff. Now, if we just looked at that battle there we won, we got a nice lot of items. So we got some crowns and florins and stuff like that for purchasing items with. We got some free experience, we got some flags, we got some heals, blah blah blah. But we also got some free experience. Now the free experience in War Thunder is locked away and you can't really use it unless you use premium currency. Now of course in World of Warships you can use premium currency to convert it, so if I convert that now, it means I've got more free experience. But with that free experience, I could actually buy a ship if I wanted to. If I save up enough, for instance, you could buy the Alaska, and that's a lot of free experience, which I don't have. But things like the Nelson, for instance, is a ship that's viable to get for most players, you know, because you do get free experience, you win free experience, you get given free experience. Sometimes with the loot box system they have, you get free experience in it, and it builds up, and then you can buy yourself a brand new boat for it, which is just awesome. The daily login system for World of Warships at the moment is you log in. Today, for instance, I got 50,000 credits, which is nice. Then in a couple of days' time, I'll get a premium account for one day. Then I'll get 500 golden doubloons, so for 500 of the premium credits things for logging in. Again, this is something that is really good because it rewards the players that keep playing your game. It rewards the players that basically you want to retain. Now you want to retain your free-to-play players because they're going to buff up the number of matches. The amount of players you have is vital. Now you can see at the moment there's only 6,800 players on the Asian servers, which isn't a huge amount. If I go to War Thunder right now, there's about 20,000 players on. But as I said, this is just the Asia server. If I go to the American server, there could be more players on. In European server, there could be more players on. This is something that doesn't help with wargaming, but it just sort of shows that they actually care about their player base because they give you the servers of your area, so there's less ping, there's a better stability, which again is something Gaijin hasn't given people down in Australia. For instance, there's actually Australian servers for these games now, which means that we can actually play them competitively. The loot box system is fantastic because you get it by earning experience. So you play some battles and you get a loot box. Now, it's not a gambling loot box, it's purely just a reward loot box. Now, you can buy gambling loot boxes, of course, but you don't have to. You can just get these containers. And the nice thing is you can choose to get what you want. So for instance, if you want more credits, you can choose that. Signals, consumables, resources, or just try your luck to get a super container, you can do that. So we're just going to go credits. So just got a standard container. Awesome. We open it up, and in there we've got 50,000 credits, some coal, and a couple of flags, which is brilliant. It's just an extra little bonus that really helps out. Now the system they have for coal is a fantastic thing as well. If we go to the arsenal, we can actually check this out, because they have a system that lets you buy premium vehicles. Now, as you can see, I won some florins and crowns. So with crowns and florins, you know, you can buy packs of the new British aircraft carriers, for instance, if you wish to. If we go to ships, for instance, with things like coal or steel is gotten through the clan battles, but with coal, for instance, you can buy ships. Now, of course, you need a lot of coal to buy some of the more extravagant ships, but you can still buy them. You can still build up that resource to buy these vehicles, which is again something that's just great and nice to have in a game, because it means that you don't have to spend real money. You can actually purchase these premium ships yourself. If you don't really care about that, you can use it to buy upgrades or signals or even containers. You know, you can buy the containers, for instance, and you know, just things like that you can use it for. There's an in-game currency that actually has some use. These are all things that they do right, and these are all things designed to keep players coming back to the game. You want players to come back to the game because the more players you have, the more battles you have, and the more time people spend in a game for you. Anyway, I've had my little rant, I've had my little chat. Let me know in the comments below what you think. There probably will be a little bit more World of Warships content in the next couple of weeks or so, or maybe some different content, just because War Thunder is really frustrating me at the moment, but I'm sure it will be back. Until next time, this is me, Screezilla, out. Bye bye.